Okay, this is the second time I'm filming this video because the first time it was like 30 minutes long and just really awkward and I just rambled the entire time. Let's try again. Hey, what's up you guys? I'm Caitlin from Leave Me Alone Plants. You may know me as your favorite plant YouTuber, your favorite plant shop owner, or you might not know me, in which case, welcome. Hi, how are ya? Now, I've been into plants for a long time, and despite being somebody who loves plants and has probably upwards of 100 plants in my home, I hate to say it, but from time to time, I'm just not feeling it. I'm like, listen girl, you're living rent-free in this house, you're not pulling any weight, and I gotta take care of you all the time. Sometimes I'm like, I'm just over them. I don't know how else to say it. I just sometimes don't want to take care of my plants. If you've watched this channel for a long time, you may have noticed I have been putting out a ton of videos, and overall, I guess what I just wanted to come here today and talk about is what to do when you're kind of in that slump with your plants and you're feeling maybe overwhelmed or just like uninterested in them. And I have conversations about this with like plant people privately a lot, but it seems like a lot of people don't talk about it. Coincidentally, Harley G, which I feel like literally everybody in the world follows, made a very similar video this topic actually like today. It just got posted, so if you're interested in this topic, go check it out. It was awesome. But I wanted to give my take on it as well, and basically what I wanted to go through today, normalize, I hate when people say that, but like normalize feeling like you don't like your plants, talk about that a little bit, and then give tips for what to do in advance if you think that you might be somebody who like loses interest in your plants, and then what to do to just get your plants by and make sure that they don't die while you are feeling in that period of, kind of just not about it. So with all that said, hopefully round 2 of filming this will be a little less long or awkward, or I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Maybe third time's the charm. But regardless, let's get into it. So, as always, I feel like I try and do this a lot in my videos, but I hope if anybody out there is feeling like a bad plant parent because, they're not into their plants right now, or they want to get rid of all their plants, or maybe you've like let some of your plants die or all of them die. Don't worry, it's happened to me. Literally all of the above scenarios have happened to me, so please don't feel bad about it. I think it happens to all of us. The example that makes sense to me in my head, I think this happens with every other hobby as well. I know for myself, I like to do photography sometimes in my free time outside of being a plant mom, and me and my photography friends would always talk about how like months would go by where we were just so uninspired and like didn't want to shoot, and there was nothing that really interested us in the realm of photography. And that probably happens for every hobby in the world, like whether you're a runner or a painter or, oh god, I don't even know what other hobbies people do. But yeah, I think it happens with everything. It's just kind of unfortunate reality that with plants, if you lose interest in a hobby for like 2 months and don't do anything with them, they die. So it's kind of a unique scenario here. But if you're like myself and that you just kind of accept this as a normal phase of your hobby, then I wanted to start off with some ideas that I have for how you can kind of prevent these problems from happening when you get in this mood. And then after that, we'll get into some care tips that can make your care a lot easier when you're just not feeling like taking care of your plants. So my very first tip for how to prepare if you think that you're gonna fall out of interest with your plants is to get hydro spikes. Now, I actually have done a full video, I will link it up here, on how to use hydro spikes, what they do, like how they work, all that stuff. But basically what it is, I wish I had one here right now. I don't want to rip one out of one of my plants, but basically how it works, it's this long cord with a little ceramic spike. You put the spike in the plant, and then you run the cord into a glass of water, and what's going to happen is through capillary action, I think is the right word, it is going to just like automatically water your plants and keep the soil moist so that they don't dry out. Now the really cool thing about these hydro spikes is there's no limit to like the size of the basin of water that you put it in. So in theory, you could fill up like a gigantic bucket and have all your plants leading into there, and the only thing you would have to do is fill up that bucket. Now, I will say setting up the hydro spikes initially is kind of a bit of work, so if you feel like in the future you're probably not going to want to do it, I recommend maybe just like picking some up. They're pretty cheap. I'll link them down below, but buy some ahead of time, set them up, and then you're just good to go. The next piece of advice I have might only apply to me, but for some reason, one of my least favorite parts of watering my plants has to do with literally like filling up the watering can. I have like this small little elephant watering can that I use inside my house for hundreds of plants, and it literally is enough water to like water 5 plants at once, like at most. So having to go back and forth to the sink and water it, to me, I don't know, super annoying. I don't like it. So what you can do instead, actually, 2 suggestions here. One thing that I have started doing a while back is when I get like nice glass jars, or they honestly don't even have to be nice, even if you have like empty pop bottles, I literally just fill them up with water and I stick them next to my plants so that if I walk past a plant and I notice that it's looking kind of dry, I literally have water there, and the only thing I have to do is just dump it in. It makes it way easier, and for some reason in like my mind way less stressful and just like labor intensive to do. So if you anticipate that you're not going to want to water your plants in the future, I recommend just having little basins of water sitting around the house at the ready to water your plants. Kind of going off of this, something that you may have not thought of doing, and it's going to depend on what type of faucets you have in your house, but if you have a standard like just faucet that's like normal and doesn't have any of the little attachments on the end of it, what you can actually do is buy one of those green stretchy garden hoses from Amazon that you would typically use in your garden, attach it right to your sink, and walk around your entire house with it. I mean, unless you live in a mansion, but I don't, so that works for me. Again, this makes watering your plants way easier, way faster, and if it's something that you dread, it might be something to look into. Now, if you're very like handy dandy, I'm pretty sure you can actually somehow like hook it into the water line itself so that you can kind of just like leave it there and take it at the ready, but that's not something I'm savvy enough to do. So, figure it out for yourself, see if that option works. But again, if you just hate like having to fill up so many things of water and march around your house, then that can definitely simplify things down. This next step is, again, probably something you have to plan pretty far in advance for, but that is putting your plants inside terrariums, particularly closed terrariums. Now, the great thing about using terrariums and closed terrariums more specifically is that it reduces the speed at which the water evaporates out of the soil. And again, if you're using a closed terrarium, in many cases, you don't ever have to go back and water it. It's literally just like a closed ecosystem that takes care of itself. Personally, what I like to use this for in my house are plants that require a little more humidity. Again, I live here in Arizona in the desert. My relative household humidity is somewhere usually between like 20 and 30%, so on the low side. And doing this basically not only allows me to extend out the amount of time between waterings, but it also provides that humidity in a scenario where, it's like just more important. For somebody who does not like the look of terrariums, conversely, what you can do is actually adjust the soil and type of pot that you put your plant in. Now, again, this is going to vary towards types of plant. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this for something like a cactus, but if you have a plant that's like a calathea or a monstera, something that, likes a little bit of a moister soil, what I actually do is put that plant, first of all, in a soil that is very, very moisture retaining. And then from there, I do not have almost any plants in my house in terracotta pots. I instead tend to opt for plastic pots. And what this is going to do, once again, is slow down the speed at which the water evaporates out of your plants. It can't escape from the sides, and it, is going to get a little more retained in the soil, so it's just going to extend out that window from when you need to water your plants. Now again, be careful in doing this. You certainly can rot a plant this way if, it's not a plant that can handle a little bit of a moister soil for a longer period of time. But if it can, this is definitely a strategy that I like to use, and it's been really great for me in just keeping my plants healthy on a longer timeline. Finally, the last step that I have for you to do ahead of time when you think that you might not want to take care of your plants is to use a slow release fertilizer. Now, for me personally, even when I do want to take care of my plants, fertilizing is something that I am so bad at. So by switching to something that's going to be a little more slow release, it's going to make sure that you don't have to go in with those fertilizers often. It's not an extra step to remember. For me, the most frustrating thing about having to fertilize my plants is I like to water them first and then fertilize them after so the roots aren't getting burned, but it's just like this whole process. So personally for me, I like to use worm castings, but you can use more of a synthetic slow release, whatever floats your boat. But Again, basically that is just going to ensure that your plants are getting the nutrients they need without requiring you to do all this intensive work fertilizing them every single time. Okay, now all those things are great, but let's say that just today you've decided like you're over it. You're not feeling the plants and you do not want to have to take care of them. So what can you do now to make this care process easier for you, particularly if you have a lot of plants like myself and it can get a little overwhelming? Well, the first thing I recommend is if you use grow lights or if you use humidifiers, order an outlet timer on Amazon and plug those bitches in. Because I know for me, I tend to be the most forgetful person and I never remember to turn on my humidifier or turn on my grow lights until I'm like looking at the plant and I'm like, oh my god, it's dying. So if you are like myself, these can be great. Even if, again, you're not, out of love with your plants, this can really help just kind of simplify your overall process for taking care of them and make sure that nothing gets forgotten, because I'll tell you what, those outlet plugs, they never forget. They're really good little household employees. The next thing that you can do pertains to watering, and this is going to be particularly helpful if you have a large collection like myself, and that is filling up your bathtub with a very shallow level of water. And instead of going in and having to water every single one of your plants individually, just bring them to the bathtub and pop them in the bottom. Now, if you don't have a bathtub that you can like fill up with water, you can do this in the sink. Obviously, you can't put as many plants in there. You can also do it in like a little kiddie pool if you have one of those. So, whatever you have around that you can kind of just fill up and place them in there. Of course, you can do it with a single bowl. In that scenario, you can typically only get like 1 or 2 plants in there, but again, this will really depend on the size of your collection. Now, it is important to note that you should not just like leave your plants sitting in standing water for days on end. Typically when I do it, I like to only leave them in there between like 15 minutes, an hour at the absolute most. The reason being, if you leave them in there too long, they can actually get root rot from just like sitting in standing water. So you of course don't want that to happen, but again, this can be a really, really fast way to get through your watering. And additionally, like we had mentioned earlier with fertilizing, if you're not somebody who wants to go in with a slow release fertilizer, you kind of like doing it more often on a regular cycle, you can actually throw fertilizer right into this mix as well and let them soak it up right from the bottom. Now, something I probably should have mentioned in here if I hadn't already is that this only is going to work if the bottom of the pot that you have it in, either 1 has a drainage hole or 2 is porous. If you're just trying to like magically have plastic absorb water, obviously that is not going to work. But if you do have a drainage hole, or if you are, using a little more of a porous pot, then this should be a great option for you. My final tip to do in the moment is to get catch pots or little plastic saucers or just something for your plant to sit on. One of the biggest issues that I have with watering my plants and why it takes so long if I am doing a watering can method and not letting them bottom water is that when I go in and water them, they leak water all over the place because they have drainage holes in them. By having them in something that can catch that water, I can much more quickly go through, water them, and then, when I'm feeling it, go back later and dump out any extra water in there. No longer do I have to worry about the water dripping out and getting all over my furniture, which, occasionally does happen. And by occasionally, I mean every single time that I water my plants. So, if this is a problem that you're having, again, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting saucers. And guess what? If you don't like the look of those like ugly plastic ones, because I don't, go to your local thrift shop and get like pretty silver platters for them to sit on. You can literally get them for the same price as the cheap plastic ones, and they look adorable. And if you haven't checked it out yet, check out my full video on thrifting for plant stuff, because that was a fun one. The final thing that I want to discuss on this topic is don't fall into the sunk cost fallacy. If you are falling out of love with your plants and maybe you have a rarer plant or a plant that, is more expensive and it's just difficult to take care of and you're not enjoying it and just nobody's having a good time, consider selling or rehoming the plants. I know it can be really, really hard to do, especially if you're selling that plant for less than you paid for it, but I don't think it's worth to, hate your entire collection because you're getting frustrated with certain plants, or hold on to a plant that you don't even enjoy taking care of just because you paid a lot of money for it. If you feel this way, hey, go for it. Resell it, rehome it, do your thing, but I don't think you should ever feel like you have to hold on to a plant for a certain reason. Anyway, those are all the tips that I had today. I hope at least one of them was helpful. I hope this video even made sense in general. If it did, give it a thumbs up. If it didn't, just avoid the dislike button. Just click away. But anyway, thanks so much for sticking around until the end. I hope you have a wonderful time with your plants and fall back in love with them. But until then, I hope to see you in the next video.